Hello everyone. It is a nice, beautiful fall Tuesday evening here in Toronto. I hope it's lovely where you are. I've already seen in the chat that we've got people here from Tasmania as well as all over the States and Canada already. Thank you very much for showing up this evening. I don't know how many of you, your families went back to school last week and your older kids have gone back to college or university, but it's a busy time and it's a big switchover for a lot of people. Fortunately for me, I don't have kids. If you've received my newsletter, it's really strange nowadays to have Labor Day go by and not really even have a blip of any kind. But I did get away for a couple of days quilting with some of my Stitch sisters last week, and that was really, really nice, and a nice end to the summer. See lots of people here that I recognize. Glad to see you all. Nancy Cox, we've missed you in the Karen's Quilt Circle for the last couple of months. I hope to see you maybe this weekend. Do I see Gladys here? I thought I saw Gladys. Marty's here. Good to see you, Marty. We've got people up from Collingwood. Will I be attending the AQS in Lancaster this weekend? No, I am not leaving home for a little while. I'm going to be having Thanksgiving in BC this year, and then we're heading off to Indonesia. And my travel buddy is in the crew. Joanne's right there. And I think we've got a couple of other people there coming to Indonesia with us. So let's just start with the first question. Kathy Rask. Now, Kathy has asked a lot of good questions over the years, so I'm always happy to see her in the question list. And she says, what's the best way to sew scrap strings together without using paper or another layer that minimizes thread fraying? Unfortunately, there's no way for you to stop, for threads to stop fraying. It's just a fact of the matter. And unfortunately, there's certain types of fabric that fray more than others. If you've ever worked with linen, you just need to look at it and it frays. And of course, fabric that's cut off grain will fray more than fabrics that are cut on the grain, just because there's just more things to catch with friction. But I did make a video a number of years ago. I think it's this one right here. I think it's this one. Yeah, fraying fabrics. That will give some tips in there. But for now, I will just say just a couple of quick ones. Don't trim up your strips until you're actually going to use them, because they're just going to fray again. Like some people trim them all up and put them in a drawer. Don't worry with that step. Just trim them up right before you're going to use them, because they'll fray while you're not looking. The other thing is, when you store them, our tendency is put the good sides together and leave the raw edges exposed, because that's not the good side. That's the bad side. But it's actually better if you store your blocks with the wrong sides together. And don't touch them. Like, part of the problem with fraying fabrics is you overwork them. You know, you're ironing the heck out of them and trying to push them into square. You steam them and all this other stuff. But for me, I find it's just easiest if I do it once and then put it aside and try not to touch it again. And that's, as I say, easier said than done. The other thing is, don't trim them till just before you're going to use them. And a lot of people will trim up a lot of them and then work at them that way. So some things that will help them not fray are not really practical. So just try and figure out a balance for yourself and just work with it that way. Tracy Florio, she's not here this evening, but she sent this to me via text message today. She said, when modifying a block to make it larger, like you're turning a block from 8 inches to 10 inches, how do you do it? Well, I did talk about this in this other video that I made. I think it's this one. this one? Let's see. Yes, this one. So the easiest, I use graph paper is really what it comes down to. I will just take a piece of graph paper, and sometimes I have to mark it out in the original 8-inch size. But you just see get all the lines where they're supposed to be. Okay, so this one's half, this one's a midpoint, and this one's 2/3, and this one's 1/3. So you understand where they are. And then you just make a 10-inch block and make the same marks. So you transfer the one that's in the middle. If it's 2/3 and you've just got some odd measurements, you just fold the paper. You don't need to worry about measuring, just fold the paper till you get 3 equal pieces. And then to figure out what size of the pieces that you need, then you just cut those shapes out and you put them on your paper and you add 1/4 of an inch to it. And that's the easiest way to do it. Now, some people who are more technical, if you have a program like Illustrator, what you can do is you can make it in the original size and then just group it and size it up to a 10-inch size, and you'll get the same result. One time when you're resizing things, like if it works perfectly at 8, again, some of the measurements will not be perfect when they get to 10. So at 8, you may have them like 2 inches and 2 inches. Well, when you get higher, they may be awkward sizes. So that's the one reason why you can use that as a template and just cut the pieces out. So just add 1/4 seam allowance to any square and rectangle around the edges, so 1/2 inch. And then with the triangles, again, you add the 1/4 inch all along the side, and then you don't, yeah, I think you guys can all get it from there. I don't need to go any more detailed. Georgie Clifton has asked, what is an easy way to put a binding on a California King size quilt? So you're saying California King. What is making the California King size more difficult than like a twin? I don't think the fact that it's a California King over a regular King or an Alaskan King or one of those doesn't really make any difference. You may be just talking about the size, but I'm going to ask you to just clarify that question for me, okay? What is the best type of binding to put on a hand-embroidered and hand-quilted quilt? Well, I would still work with the regular type of bindings. If you're working with a piece of handwork that has scalloped edges or rounded corners or just a slightly more interesting shape than squares, a rectangle or a square with a corner on it, then you want to use bias binding. And I have definitely made a video on how to make bias binding, and you can buy bias binding as well. What's the name of the company? I think it's Bee and Hazel. I've highlighted them a couple of times. If it's just, I would definitely be hand binding it, which means you attach it on one side with a sewing machine, then you fold it over and hand sew it along the side. And depending on the style of embroidery that you've done, you may want to do some nice fancy stitches to attach it. You may want to do a blanket stitch on the edge or add some extra trim with some French knots and things like that. So it's basically what you've done and what feels comfortable for you. So big and heavy. Okay, clarifying the California King. So how do you put it on a big quilt like that? You might have seen a couple of videos ago. I think I did it just before the holidays, and I was finishing some things off. When I was finishing off my larger quilts, I was actually standing, and I had moved my sewing machine over to my cutting table, and I was letting a lot of the weight sit on the cutting table. If you don't have the ability to raise your desk and move it to your cutting table, you can always just bring in other tables to go around your sewing machine. I know I've said this before, but my brother-in-law works at a sail company, and their sewers sit in the middle of the sail, and they have tables all around them as they push through the sails. So you don't need to go fast. You don't need to sew a whole length at one time. Just sew a couple of feet and then rearrange the weight and then move a couple of feet more. Just take your time, breathe. One step at a time will still get you to the end. So it is a big job, but in the end, it's just done the same way that you do any other quilt. Hello, Gloria. Glad to see that you've made it. Corinne's here. I haven't seen Corinne for a little while. I hope you're doing well. Denise Chapman from Mount Vernon. I've been listening to Hamilton, and Mount Vernon comes up a lot. Can string quilts be sewn on a serger? Yes, if you want to. The only thing the serger does is it adds a bulky seam. So just understand that that's just going to show through on the back. But I've done a number of patchwork quilts on the serger. For me, I was using heavier knit fabrics when I did it. But yeah, serger's fine. Serger is fine. So I would try and get a loftier batting, but that may not be your choice, and that will help hide those thicker seams, but it's not the end of the world. It'll all be loved. Okay, so Mary Sue James sent an email and has asked, she is wondering if I've already done a video on how to do patchwork blocks that fit around a panel or another smaller block that might be 10 by 12 by 12, for instance. She used to love the math, but she's stumped and she doesn't know how to do the figuring. She doesn't want to do the hard figuring out. Well, go back to that video that I just showed you on the sewing hacks, this one. You just do the measuring with, I did it with adding machine tape, but you can do it with a cloth measuring tape. You can do it with masking tape even. But just measure how much space that you have and then divide it up just by folding to figure out what size blocks to make. And remember, you're working with the finished size when you do that. So if it comes out to 6 inches, then you're going to make 6.5 inch blocks unfinished. And you can just figure out what you want to do. You can make piano keys, you can do half square triangles, you can do hourglass blocks. You can just do braids like I've shown you how to do. So that is the fastest way to figure out how many patchwork blocks you need. Sylvia she's in Alaska in the Mojave Desert in California. Well, that is a climate change. Okay. Grandma Joe from Yorkshire. Hello from England. Can I please ask how long that you've been quilting and how did you start? I have been quilting since 2007, and I really started quilting, other than just a craft that I picked up every so often, in 2013. That's when I really began to pick it up. And I started because I just thought I had some extra time on my hands, and I took a quilting class, and I bought some fabric, and it was something that I just picked up every so often. And then I really picked it up because it was a stress reliever for me. I was working very hard, and I just needed something to come home. Now, if you saw my interview last week, let me just find this one, with Teresa Benson, there is a really good nugget of gold in there that she was given by one of her bosses, and it was that you need to find a project that has a beginning, middle, and end. And because so often in our jobs, in our life, we don't get that satisfaction of the beginning, middle, and end. And a quilt will provide that for us. I mean, sometimes the end feels very far off. There's so many steps, but there is an end, and you get to celebrate that. And I think that's what it gave me. There was just so many things going on in my life between menopause, kids leaving home, just the transition of life, a very busy work life, and you know, there was just a little bit too much chaos in the world at that time too. So that's how I started. Zippy has asked, when is it worth to invest in a long arm machine? Well, it's one when you have the money. And it just depends on, well, I didn't have a long arm machine for a long time because I didn't have the space. I could afford it. I didn't have the space. They take up a lot of space. Mine is only 10 feet. They come in many different sizes, but they take up a lot of space long and they take a lot of space deep. And there's only so much you can store underneath them. So that's one of the ways that you have to afford it. Do you have the space to do it? And what are you going to do with it? You know, are you just quilting yours? I once knew a group of women, I think there were 4 of them, and they all went together and bought a machine. It stayed in the basement of one of them, but the idea was all 4 of them would use it to quilt their quilts on. Not sure how that turned out, but there's that version. I knew that I was never going to make enough quilts to pay for the computer that goes with this one. So I'm only doing pantographs and free motion quilting and ruler work on this. I don't have the assistance of a computer, but I do share it with my quilting friends. So more people can use it when I'm not. And again, I don't think you should be buying it on a loan. I think you should have the money in hand to do it. And you should probably take one for a test drive first. Just make sure that you enjoy doing it and that you have the physical strength to do it. If you have the opportunity to rent one and use one for a little bit to understand, it doesn't take away all your quilting problems. I know quilting on a domestic machine can be challenging. A long arm takes away many of the issues, but it doesn't take away all of them. So before you buy, take them for a test drive, either at a shop with renting, or take one. Make sure you use one at a show, and then save up for it. Audrey Ainsworth has asked, which projects am I working on right now? I'm not sure if you remember, I did a video on a really big paper piecing block. I am working on finishing off my nephew's wedding quilt. I'm hoping to get it to him for his 4th anniversary, and I'm just at the very bottom of it right now. The next one that's going to be on the long arm after that will be my Quilt Bees QuiltCon entry. So I always quilt it, so that's going to be on it next. I've got a number of projects halfway done, and this is the time of year when I begin to look at them and say, okay, what can I get done before the end of the year? Because I always like to start the new year off with new ideas and new projects. I hate things dragging from one year to the other. At least I try to avoid it. I don't have any long-term UFOs. They're all fairly, I think I've got 2. I've got some baby quilts there to quilt, so lots of things to do on the long arm this month. Yes, I just see somebody said that they got their long arm on Facebook Marketplace. And yeah, that's a very good place to look for long arms. Mary has asked, have I started the Amsterdam on the canal quilt? No, I haven't. So hopefully that will be in the new year. Patty has asked, when making your after quilt, how do you keep symmetrical when it will be trimmed? So the after quilt, I myself, when I'm making these after quilts, are usually trying to keep it square. Not everything's perfectly square, but I'm trying to keep them at least one major line of an after quilt square, so I have something to line up with. And it must be flat. An after quilt has to be flat because that is what you're putting everything else on top of. Your top can be a little bit wonky a bit, and you can massage the top as you're quilting it, but you can't do that with the back. The back has to be flat. So it's just how you square it up. As you're building your after quilt, you need to have one axis of it that's going to be straight, and just keep at it. And I've warned you as well, you need to know where your outside edges are going to be, because you don't want a lot of little pieces in your outside edges. When you trim off, that's where you have your bigger pieces, so that it makes a nice clean cut. Mary says, I didn't want to pronounce her last name. Most people get it wrong. Well, I'm going to give it a try then. Gerstich. Gersetch? I'm afraid I don't speak. It looks German to me, or Dutch. Okay, so Gay Storm has asked, why do the corners of my binding not come out square, or come not square? So if your quilt is square, the reason why they get rounded in there, go to my video Binding 101, because it explains it there, but I'll try and say it here. So binding is a folded over piece of fabric. Do I have any here? Just see if I can. Of course, I've got the smallest scissors ever right here to try. Oh, it's not even going to cut. Okay, so just imagine that this is your binding here. Okay, so when you're folding this, when you're coming along and you're getting to the corner, and then you're making that 45-degree fold, most people can get the top of it folded nicely, but they forget about the stuff that's inside it. So that's why I have the 2-in-1 tool. Let me just see if I've got one here. I've got one of my good ones here too. So this is one that my husband made me, but I've got a couple at home made out of Mylar. So what happens is when I get to that corner, I lay this on top of it. So when I fold it over, that point makes sure that the fabric underneath is nice and flat. Because what you're trying to do is get this corner, and the fold all to be at that 1/4 inch mark. I'm not explaining it that well here, but I do have a diagram on that in that video that explains it fairly well. But you're either sewing too far down, you're too close, you're too close, you need to stop at least 1/4 inch, if not a stitch shy of that. When you do your folds over, you need to use something like this to make sure that the fabric in the fold is completely tucked in. And then when you come down and you're starting the second edge, you need to be at 1/4 inch. And that would get you a nice square corner. So if people want to know what this actually does, so this is 2.5 inches. So that's the width of your binding strip. This is the corner. So it does a couple of things. It cuts when you're needing to get that angle on your binding, when you're joining them together, this gives it. This line here will line up with the edge of the binding that's going this way, and this is the angle. Yep, that's the angle. It also helps tuck in the corners when you're sewing the binding on. And at the end, if you want a nice finished one, this is the width that the two pieces have to overlap. So it's called a 3-in-1. And it's also good when you're doing foundation paper piecing to use this as the edge to help fold things over. So I've got a number of videos where this is this is exhibited on my website. I've got a template for this if you need it. It's 10 sewing hacks with template plastic. I think is the first one it was in. It's also shown in the Binding 101 video. Okay, I don't think I can increase my, no. Okay, Cindy Bunker has asked, I have a bin full of cotton fabric clothes from my mom who passed in 2022. My daughters want a memory quilt. Do you have any suggestions for patterns? I'm a novice. What I would do is, depending on what tools you have, I would just get there's a ruler that is 6 inches by 24. That's a pretty standard one that everybody uses. I would cut squares that are 6 inches. If you actually have a 5-inch ruler or maybe a 4.5-inch ruler, you could cut pieces that size. I'm actually, within the next 2 weeks, I am having, my next video is going to be the easiest, peasiest beginner quilt ever. So you can just stay tuned for that video. Ooh, Regina from Georgia has asked, any suggestions for using vintage purchased orphan blocks in a quilt that you have made? Well, if you've just got one or two, it really depends on what they are. Like I am really, it's really depends on what they are, what shape they're in, whether you like them, whether you like the colors. There's just so many variables in that and how you want to do it. You could sash them and make a quilt out of them. If they're not square, I don't even think you should be under any obligation to use them. I would square them. There's just so many things that you could do with them, and it depends on your taste as well. You can alternate them with 9 patches. There's just so many different things that you could do. Somebody has asked, is it okay to join the Quilt Crew Stitch and Chat and not sew during it? Yes, we do have many people that just show up and chat. We do a number of things beside sew. Most people, if they have something new, they get to show it off. People ask questions on how to handle some quilting problems. And we catch up with everyone every month. So yes, new people are always welcome. Connie King has asked, what made you decide to do YouTube? Thank you for deciding. Thank you, Connie. What made me decide to do YouTube? I actually did my first couple of YouTube videos because I made a promise to my guild that I would make some videos to explain how to do a block video. But I actually found I enjoyed making videos. I like the storyline of it. I like the explaining of little things that I have figured out. There's so many amazing brains out there in the quilting world. It's just been wonderful to see people try things and show them, and it has gone through a number of different growth stages. At the beginning, it was, fun things that I had found out. Now it has episodes of textile tours and podcasts, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I found it was a good match for my skill set. So the quilt behind me is my Capella cluster quilt. This was a quilt that I taught a class on my Fire and Ice crew, and I entered it in QuiltCon last year, and I actually made it specifically for right here, as you can see, because the colors work so well. So I was hoping to get a pattern and a class out on this, but unfortunately my summer has had other plans for me. So um, just trying to figure out how to do that without being like in the casual way that I like to do these things. So I may do it as part of Karen's quilt crew, but an upper tier, um, and we'll do it for 3 months and get it done. Um, what do you guys think of that? Would that be a good idea? I would appreciate your comments on that. I should have more polls because you guys always have great advice. What method do I like to use for quilting? Hand, domestic, or long arm? I prefer the long arm, but I'm not adverse to doing it on my domestic machine if I have to. I do not like doing it by hand. One reason is I'm not good at it. I've tried it and I'm not good at it, and I've just got easier ways to do it. It's a little bit too slow for me. That said, I'm taking up Sashiko, so that's not quilting, but it's a running stitch, and maybe if I get better at that, I'll try quilting again. Krista Cat has just asked, what do I do with all my quilts? So, I make quilts for people and I give them away. For instance, the one on the long arm is going to be for my nephew. And having given him one, I then have a niece that I have to give one that I'll be making one for. She was married last year. I make quilts. A lot of my small projects are baby quilts, and they go to a local hospital. Always happy to give them. I enjoy that. Those are small projects that I often use up scrap fabric for them. I often experiment with them. Like in the batch that I just gave, I was experimenting with different types of batting, silk, wool, just to see what was going on with them. I have some bigger ones here that I'm giving to Quilts for Survivors. I do keep all of my stash busters, mainly for archival purposes. I keep the ones that have been on my channel in some way, so just like to keep them as touchstones, so I can always go back to them. But I do notice my quilt, my quilt buffet is overflowing. So I'm going to probably be donating a couple of my good ones to some charities, and maybe they can raffle them off because I just don't have the room for them anymore. And they're not doing the world any good sitting in my quilt cabinet. So would love to keep everything, but I just don't have enough beds in my house, so I don't really want them doing nothing. I'd rather them be on somebody making a difference. So I know that there was a friend of mine, the church that she belongs to, they were helping a number of teenage girls from the north finish high school, get adjusted, and they were set up in a house not about an hour out of the city. And I'm thinking maybe that I'll give them to them. That's a small group. I can give 4 quilts, and then yeah, that's what I'll do. Michelle Helise, I think. What is an after-quilt? An after-quilt is just what I have nicknamed a piece backing. It started with almost the very first quilt I made. I made it out of fabric that I really never wanted to use again. So I was determined to use up every single piece in making the back. And I called it an after-quilt. And that's just what people call them all sorts of different names, but that's what I call them. I often don't do as many as I used to. Even though like this one is a piece back because the quilt is 84 by 80, and that's just too wide for, I needed to do a strip down the middle. But I don't really consider that an after quilt. for me, the after quilts are the ones where I've used up all the little bits of blocks, the leftover blocks, I call them mulligans, the ones that weren't good enough to be on the front. I put them on the back. Crystal Snyder has asked, she's very fascinated with English paper piecing. Wondering if you have a suggestion for cutting the paper. Paper punch, Sizzix, what are your thoughts on EPP? There's a company in the US called Paper Pieces, and you can buy a bag of particular sizes for, I actually don't know the current rates, but I was listening to, there's a good couple of videos, I think there's 4 videos on Fat Quarter Shop where Tula Pink is talking about her experience and the method that she uses for English paper piecing. And she said she buys the paper now. So that she can save her hands for the actual piecing. Cutting all that paper takes some time. So in general, I usually buy the paper pieces now. The only exception to that is my hexes that I use. So I make, do I have it here? No, my hexes are at home. But I have a punch. It's a Fisker's punch. It's called a 1.5 inch hexagon, but we in quilting measure our hexagons different. So it's 1.5 inches because that's the distance between one point to another. Basically, it's the diameter of a circle that hexagon can fit into. In quilting, we call the sizes based on the length of the side. So that's 3/4 inches. So that's why it works. And I do that because I get a lot of cardstock. You know, it comes in magazines, it comes in the mail, and I just punch them all out and I use them for hexagons. And I don't know what I'm doing with all these hexagons. I use all my scrap fabric. I think I'm waiting till I have like 3 or 4 bags full, and then maybe I'll decide what I'm going to do. So somebody has asked, do I sew a stay stitch around the perimeter of my flimsies? I don't sew around the whole perimeter before I start. I do a basting stitch across the top, and just depending on what I'm doing, I will do one along the side. If I'm doing a pantograph, I'm definitely basting along the side, but I baste as the quilt advances. When was the last time? I think there's only 2 quilts where I've ever basted the whole darn thing before I started. And yeah, I'm not a big show quilter. Maybe if I was and I was looking for a level of perfection that I do not have, I might do that. I might sew around the outside edge. But I find that there's also a lot of give within the fabrics. And sometimes if I sew around the outside edge to begin with, I have an accumulation of fabric when I get to the bottom. So I've only done it a couple of times all the way around the edge at the beginning. Oh, we are at 7:41. So a couple more questions here. Somebody's asked what a scant 1/4 inch seam is. Okay, so I have a video on a 1/4 inch seam, how to get a perfect one, and it totally explains it. So I recommend that you watch that video. I don't have a link for it, but it's just go to my channel and search for it. So having a 1/4 inch seam is what makes all the magic of a quilt block work. So when you're doing a block and it has a half square triangle in it, and it has a rectangle, and it has a 1/4 square triangle in it, the math will all work if you cut accurately and you sew accurately. So how do you get that 1/4 inch seam? If you sew on exactly the 1/4 inch mark, when you flip everything over, when you iron it, and you use a good ironing technique, so you're finger pressing, you're rolling over the fabric, and then you're pressing, you'll probably find that your 1/4 inch is just a little bit short. Your block is either a little big or a little small. And that is because the folding of the fabric takes up a bit of the seam. So you have to sew in just either a little bit to the left or to the right of where you think your 1/4 inch mark should be. And that is what's called a scant. A scant is when you sew just on the inside of that 1/4 inch line. So for many people, that's good enough. That's the type of blocks they made. Um, that gets them their measurements. They trim up the block, sew them all together. It works for the accuracy they're looking for. But when you get into more advanced blocks, or there's a difference in the size of the blocks between the length and the width. So most of the time we're working with square blocks, but sometimes our blocks are 12 by 6. And if you've got 5, like my block for the chips and jelly, if you're using a scant 1/4 inch, it's not going to work for you because you've got more seams going in one direction than you have going in the other. So scant can work for some things, but if you're not getting the results you're looking for, watch that video on how to get a perfect 1/4 inch seam. And it's not that difficult. All it takes is just testing out your machine before you sit down and just adjusting your line on the side. A little to the left, a little to the right. Excuse me. Catherine is saying that she recently bought an easy flying geese triangle ruler, and she's keen to use it. Do you have a favorite quilt pattern for flying geese? There's all sorts of great patterns for flying geese. I actually like it in a bigger block. So you do something with the block in the middle, and then you put a flying geese all there, and you can either put a half square triangle or just a square in the corners. So the resulting block, I think, is 16 inches. So they're really big flying geese, but you can make it in a smaller version, and it makes a lot of wonderful symmetries when it turns into a quilt top, because it connects with the blocks beside it, and you get these wonderful extra symmetries, and I just love that. So if you're needing a picture of what that block looks like, just send me an email at info@justgetitdonequilts, and I'll send it to you. Claudine Kirsch has asked, when's the next cruise? Next cruise is, I have a textile tour at the end of October, but that's not a cruise. The cruise is in May, the second week of May, I believe. I should have that more at my fingertips, but I'm just going, it's the end of May. It's the end of May, and we're going to Japan. We start off in Seoul, Korea, and then we end up in Tokyo, and looking forward to it. And I'll wait till the next Q&A to tell you what the next couple of the ones for the next ones after that are. Carrie Brigham has said she just picked up her Sashiko sampler kit at the Great Wisconsin Quilt Show. That sounded like it was a pretty wonderful quilt show. Loves to see some videos on it from me. Well, I'm just a beginner when I took my first class on the weekend, and I'm practicing as trying to get my flow going. It's interesting. There's a lot of muscle memory in your hand to do it without hurting. Dee is asked, beginner quilter here. Can I make the top for a regular bed quilt on a Singer sewing machine, 12 stitch? I really don't know what you mean by 12 stitch, but I definitely have friends who have made big quilts on very small machines. I have a friend who has a featherweight and just absolutely loves it. She's made a number of big quilts on it. Has quilting helped you with your garment making skills? Well, I would say, this is Jacqueline Whitwer, it has definitely made me more precise. Quilting, I thought it was going to be like garment sewing in the beginning, where close enough was good enough. And I found that I like more precision than that, and I'm caring about the fit much more. I've just started back to garment sewing, and it's funny because quilting, you just have fabric, right? You don't have all this other accessories that you have to worry about. There's lots of pieces, but it's just fabric. Where when I'm getting into bag making, when I'm getting into clothing making, there's all these extra accessories that you need. You need zippers, you need buttons, you need interfacing, and just all these little things that I'm not used to having. So I'm finding gathering everything together to start a garment making project quite overwhelming. Sometimes I just don't have the brain space for it. And, I've got to get a bucket where I put all this stuff. And then invariably I've forgotten one thing. But I hopefully more garments will be made. I have a couple of things that I want to make for my trip to Indonesia, some nice summer flowy dresses, because I have a feeling those are going to be needed. I'm also finding that I'm wanting a better fit in the clothes that I do have. So I'm wanting to make some adjustments so that they fit properly. I have broad shoulders, and I often need to do a full bust adjustment, but I find that right here is the hardest place to get fitted. It needs to be about here because things often pull right there. And just ruin the line of every outfit. Sometimes you can pull them down and they'll look okay, but when you start moving, they're not. So I'm looking at making garments with a different eye. I'm a different shape than I was years ago when I made clothes too, so that's another thing I've had to deal with. Weaver Nut has asked, I'm in the UK. Do you know of a company that makes hexiform, not paper? I don't know, but Vintage Sewing Box does. I interviewed Emma many years ago. I saw her at the Festival of Quilts this year. She's still going strong. So she definitely has a source for that. So check out with her. So this is my last. It's 5:50. I'm sorry, guys. This is my last question. We'll save the rest for next one. Pam Strong has asked, could you please explain the benefits of using the paper in foundation paper piecing? She doesn't quite understand the attraction to the process. Apologize to those who enjoy it. Well, what it usually means is that people have better accuracy because they're sewing on these lines. You can get shapes and forms that would be very hard to do with regular piecing. So, especially when you're, let's say, not beginner, but you're kind of in that intermediate zone, it's a really tough place because you want the precision of a master quilter, but you just don't know how to get there. And foundation paper piecing can get you there in many, many cases. There's beautiful patterns out there, but it has the drawback that you have to rip out the paper. In times gone by, these things were stamped onto pieces of like broadcloth or muslin, but nowadays we use paper. The lighter the paper, the better. Some people use tea fabric, like it's a very, very lightweight interfacing. I know Sugary Dew in the UK, in the Netherlands, likes to use that tea bag paper. But there's also another method that you can do, which is with freezer paper, where it's much easier. You don't have to rip out the paper, but you have to put a lot of effort into making sure that you redraw the lines on the freezer paper, everything's accurate, and it's really only worth your while to go to all that effort if you're doing multiple blocks that look the same. And there's many foundation paper piecing patterns, like from Legit Kits and things like that. You've seen them. There's the cute llama, I'm trying to think of some of the ones that have been done. I know like Pride and Joy Quilting does a lot of foundation paper piecing like that. And you're just doing one version of every block, so it's just much easier to use the paper. Now, there is a tool. I don't think I have it. It'll be in this week's video, but you can also get a version of it from Clover. It's a plastic stiletto. It's blue. It's kind of have this hook on the end. I never use it as a stiletto, but I use it to rip out my paper because it can get underneath the paper, but it doesn't stab my fabric. And I have found it really, really helpful to remove that paper. So I think we're going to call it an evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up. Next month, it's going to be on the 7th, I believe. Yes. I think next month will be on October 7th. This coming weekend is Karen's Quilt Crew. I will have the patterns live tomorrow. And in Karen's Quilt Crew, we're also going to have a sort of a catch-up stitch and chat later in the month on like a Wednesday night, where you can show up and just ask me any questions about any of the blocks up to date that you might have a question about, and get caught up if you need to. And what else? This week I've got a couple of things. I've got a podcast going live. I've got a video going live. I've got the class. Last month's class is going to go live. Just got that one done. So much to be done. So thank you to Gina for being in the chat and doing all the amazing things that she does. Thank you everyone for showing up. Really glad to see you all. I can see everything flying by here, and lots of beautiful questions, lots of good questions. Don't hesitate to ask. And do check out those older videos, because I have a library that can walk you through from the beginning to the end of a quilt and get it all done. So thank you, everyone. I've got to click on here. So what else is there? If you're interested in going on a cruise with me, I post them on my events page. Go to my website, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll see you online soon. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. It's going to be 1 month of staying home, and I'm looking forward